My wife and I live in a small house in a remote village. It was night, quiet, we were sleeping, and we woke up to a loud noise. We didn't understand what it was, but we both woke up suddenly in fear. We lay there silently, whispering to each other. Naturally, my wife kicked me out of bed, telling me to go check it out. Reluctantly, I went to inspect the house. Everything was quiet. No one was outside. Everything was in its place inside. Nothing had fallen. We fell back asleep. About 2 hours later, the same thing happened. This time, I clearly heard the noise and knew roughly where it was coming from. My wife was in a panic, so I went to the next room to investigate where the noise was coming from. I checked everything. It seemed fine, but I knew something was off. I stood there, waiting, scared. Just as I was about to leave the room, I felt someone's gaze on me, felt someone's presence in the room. I slowly looked around, but no one was there. I felt cold around my legs and thought the window must be open and needed closing. I moved the curtains and, jumping to the ceiling, screamed. Some old woman with big white eyes was staring at me from outside. She looked terrifying, as if she had died 2 months ago. My scream made my wife start yelling from the bedroom, calling for me. I don't remember how I bolted out of the room and rushed to my wife, trying to explain what I had seen. She burst into tears from fear while I tried to calm her down, but I was panicking myself. After about 10 minutes, we calmed down, and I went out again, taking a hammer with me this time. I walked around the house, stood in the yard, nervously smoked, freezing. It was winter after all. I came back to my wife, and we discussed what happened. She asked if I found any footprints, and it hit me. There were no footprints under the window where the old woman had stood, even though the snow was knee-deep. To confirm this, we looked out the window but found nothing. I was puzzled and started getting anxious about it, while my wife was on edge and crying again. I barely managed to calm her down. It was already near morning. We managed to get some sleep during the day since we hadn't slept at night, and now it was night again. We couldn't sleep, so we were watching TV. Everything was fine. And suddenly, the lights went out in the house. I went to check the fuses, but they were all fine. I returned to the living room. My wife was sitting on the couch. I told her that the fuses were fine and went to the kitchen for a flashlight and candles. I went into the kitchen and bumped into my wife there, also looking for candles. I was stunned. I didn't say anything to her. I stood there thinking about what to do, since I had clearly seen her in the living room, even though the lights were out, and now she was here. I took the flashlight, she grabbed the candles, and we headed to the living room. I was afraid of what might be in there, hoping my wife wouldn't see anyone because she had a bad heart and could die from the shock. I quickly opened the bedroom door with my wife behind me, and oh God, on the bed lay that same old woman, looking terrifying with her frightening gaze. We screamed in fear and bolted back to the kitchen, turned on the light, and called the police. They scolded us, saying we needed to drink less. The hysteria lasted a long time. We had a big argument, cursed the government, and started preparing to sleep, ignoring everything. But we couldn't sleep. I lay there for a long time, thinking about everything, and began to suspect why we got this house so cheaply. The previous owners knew but didn't tell us that such things happened here. It was probably the ghost of an unquiet soul. I lay there for a long time and didn't notice when I fell asleep. My girlfriend is a succubus. I started smoking again. I smoked one after another, shaking slightly. I thought about her, about the girl I met today, and my heart started performing crazy acrobatics. This must be love, I thought. She's otherworldly, though outwardly quite ordinary. It's a strange feeling when you see someone for the first time and suddenly realize that you want to possess them, and this desire is abnormal, frightening. My thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. Pashka, you're still smoking. Did something happen? My friend Kshusha was looking at me. She had long had feelings for me, but I didn't share them. It's not that I didn't like her. She's quite pretty, with blue eyes, long light brown hair, and a great figure. But sometimes you look at a person and your heart feels nothing. You realize they're not the one for you. Oh, Kshusha, go to our friends. I'm just sitting here contemplating life. Don't bother me. I replied, gruffly, which was unlike me. I saw hurt in her eyes before she turned and almost ran back to the club. Let her be upset. It's better than her imagining things. But my mysterious stranger is somewhere around here. I need to find her and introduce myself properly before someone else does. I stubbed out the half cigarette. My mouth was dry and unpleasant. Of course, I didn't even have gum. Nervously swallowing, I tried to pull myself together and went in search of the girl who had so intrigued me. This club is a cesspool, a haven for people with low moral standards. They smoke weed and almost have sex on the tables. It makes me want to go up to these couples and say, "Get a room, have some decency." Should I start campaigning? Everything blurred before my eyes. People merged, their faces dimmed in the light flashes. Everyone was shouting, their cries drowning in the loud, vibrating music. I hate these places. If it weren't for my best friend's birthday, I wouldn't have come to this den for anything. And suddenly I saw her, sitting modestly and thoughtfully at the bar, drinking just plain water. Why did she even come here? I sat down next to her and ordered a rum and coke, glancing at her from the corner of my eye. You wouldn't believe it. She looked utterly unremarkable. Thin, mouse-colored hair cut in a bob, thick bangs down to her eyes, a sharp little nose, and dressed so tastelessly. Latex leggings and a loose t-shirt with "Stop" on it. Did she rob a thrift store? Overall, the picture was depressing. But why did I want so badly for her to notice me? Gathering my courage, I said, "May I order you something? What would you like?" Honestly, I was surprised at how politely I could speak to someone. She turned to face me and my heart stopped. Her eyes overshadowed everything I thought about her before. 2 lakes, incredibly sad turquoise eyes that you want to give your soul to, just to reflect in them for the rest of your life. She smiled at me but said nothing. And I looked into her eyes, and the emptiness in my head grew. I couldn't utter another word. Everything that happened next I recall with incredible difficulty, like strange, unrealistically vivid images in a kaleidoscope. To be honest, I only remember that we left the club together and silently headed to my place. And all without saying a word. It was so strange. We ended up in my apartment, and I pounced on her like some beast or rapist. And she didn't resist at all. On the contrary, she tried to give me the most pleasure. That night was the sweetest of my life. I can't even call it sex. I can only find one word: madness. And in the morning, she wasn't next to me. She left without saying a word while I was sleeping. She quietly left the apartment. I felt strange. My head was splitting. I had no strength to even get up, and I was breathing heavily and hoarsely. I spent a week in that state. I didn't pay much attention to it, thinking I was just sick. And what do you think? Of course, I wanted to find her again. Not just wanted, but almost went crazy over it. I was tormented by the desire to repeat that madness, to repeat it all my life. I visited that club several more times that month, but never saw her there again. She came to me herself. One night, I woke up with a strange feeling that I was not alone. A passionate female body wrapped around me, and her lips did such things. In short, everything happened as it did the first time, but I tried not to fall asleep, fearing she would run away from me. I tried to get a word out of her, but she just smiled at me and remained silent. Then I suggested that she live with me, thinking she would refuse, but to my surprise, she agreed. She always came in the evening, so it turned out we lived together at night. All my friends and loved ones noticed that I had become irrational, withdrawn into myself, obsessed with a girl about whom I knew absolutely nothing, except that she was a skilled lover. And a month later, I began to go genuinely crazy. I started to feel, how can I explain it, as if this girl was drinking my soul, sucking out all my inner juices. I practically stopped eating, sleeping, and generally lost interest in the outside world. I abandoned my job, got into debt. I hit rock bottom. And one night when she came again, I started expressing my suspicions, outraged and demanding explanations. but she remained silent. Only something changed in her eyes. Due to my recent pitiful state, I couldn't hold back. I snapped and I slapped her hard across the face. But for some reason, I didn't feel any guilt. Instead, I felt a sense of liberation and finally saw what lay beyond my illusion. She bristled, and before me stood a monster, skin a delicate green shade, a small, bald skull, a huge frog-like, bright red mouth, and small, sharp, predatory teeth. Only her incredibly beautiful eyes remained. I screamed, and the monster lunged at me, sinking its teeth into my arm. I don't remember how, but in the struggle, I slammed her with all my strength against the wall and heard a short gasp. I had crushed her skull, and strange, thick black blood flooded the floor. I realized it was over and lost consciousness from the shock. Waking up in the morning, my first thought was that it had all been a dream. But the mess in the room spoke otherwise, with congealed black blood on the floor and bloody tracks leading to the front door. So it was real. I couldn't kill this creature, only severely injured it. She left and might come back. A few months passed, and I got my life back in order. The fear subsided, but didn't disappear, and the feeling of otherworldly danger haunts me. Recently, I saw her in a crowd, briefly, but it was definitely her. She's watching me. At night, I dream of her turquoise eyes, and sometimes I feel a fleeting desire to possess her again. I know she will come back, and that's why I want you to know what happened if this creature gets to me again. This story was found by the relatives of the guy after his strange death. He was found dead in his bed. He died of dehydration, as was discovered during the autopsy of his dry, crumbling body.